In ancient Greece, some people decided there were precisely 7 things that represented the most important and influential human-made creations. Now, people travel far and wide to view the 7 wonders of the world, even if all but one of the original no longer exists, and the definition of a wonder has expanded past our ability to count to 7. But today we're looking at the wonders of the world that matter more than any other, at least to my audience. That's right, we're looking at the transit wonders. We're going to define the 7 transit wonders of the world, the most influential, impressive, and iconic transit marvels that you too can arbitrarily base your vacation schedule around. Welcome to Transit World, videos on all things transportation, with a focus on the developing world. Although today, we're really focusing more on transportation that helped develop the world. Basically, I want to list the top 7 transport projects that have made transit what it is today. So I developed 5 scoring criteria, each which I'm weighing equally on a 5-point scale. I want a project which is innovative. Was this the first of its kind? Influential. Did it inspire others to copy it? Impressive. How much of a feat was it to actually put it together? Well written. Yeah, I also want to consider how many people actually ride it. But I also want something that is iconic, that has made a cultural impact outside of just transporting people. This time around, no bonus points or any other adjustments, since as Midnight 8045 states, people just don't like those non-data metrics. That said, despite my categories and rubrics, this is still a pretty subjective list. It's really hard to measure things like impressiveness and cultural influence objectively, and I'll admit my bias certainly plays in here. You may think that the Runcorn busway was more or less influential on future BRT than I do, or that the Trans-Siberian Railroad is more or less of a cultural icon. So, following another suggestion from Midnight 8045, I'm going to show my scoring, at least for the top 20, at the end of the video, so you can see how I adjudicated, and feel free to share in the comments if you have any different preferred scoring. At the end of the day, the purpose of this list, and really all of the top 5 or top 10 or top whatever lists, is to start a conversation and highlight interesting things going on, not to provide a definite end to the discussion. So that's the scoring, but how did I decide what candidates to actually evaluate? Well, I started with my own ideas. I looked at systems that I had highlighted before on this channel, and the different systems that have been important or well cited to help develop different transit modes, from rail to metro to BRT to micromobility. Then I expanded the list by doing what any reasonable person would do. I went on Reddit. It turns out that Endless Dreamer 1 had asked this exact question over a year ago, and it had nearly 100 responses. So I read through each comment and jotted down any of the suggested wonders from the thread, at least within reason. Sorry, Sid Most, but Chinese megacities just isn't specific enough. And Atlanta East Point Station, well, that's too specific. Also, no. But that raises an interesting point. What is the right scope of analysis? I generally decided on systems. So think London Underground, not separate entries for the Elizabeth Line and the Victoria Line, etc. I'm including anything from citywide to nationwide systems, depending on exactly what we're talking about, and I kind of just decided what seemed right. Also, a few other requirements to keep in mind. I'm just looking at surface travel, which does include ferries and tunnels, but not aviation. And I'm looking at passenger transit, so we're not going to count things like the Tehachapi Loop. There are plenty of rail fanning channels that cover that kind of stuff already. I'm not considering transit within buildings, so no moving walkways or elevators or escalators, unless they're outside, public, and noteworthy, i.e. I did include those in Medellin. Also, this has to still exist and be something that you can go and visit. The idea here is that these are things that you can go see on a trip. This entire exercise is really just a thinly veiled attempt for me to pick my next spots to go on vacation. All right, as usual, we're already several minutes in and still in the methodology section, so that tracks. Anyway, here are the top 7 transit world wonders. Oh hey, that's the name of the channel. Number 7, the Indian Railway. India does not have the first or the fastest trains, but they make the list given the massive size of their system and its cultural relevance. The national system has 8 billion passenger trips per year, which by most sources represents the largest ridership of any country in the world. Of course, the system is huge, so if you're heading to India and want to make the most of your train experience, I'd recommend the line from Delhi to either Kolkata or to Mumbai. Those are the 2 busiest routes in the country, and both offer plenty of interesting things to see along the way, transit-related and otherwise. Number 6, Paris Metro. Opened in 1900, this is the 5th subway system built worldwide. And it was an impressive system when it opened, but it mostly makes this list given its innovation since then. This was the first system to experiment with and then introduce rubber-tired trains with Line 11 in 1956. These were used to help performance on steep grades, spaces with shorter braking distances, and other areas where it's better to have high rolling resistance. Rubber tires were also used to reduce noise and vibration, especially on elevated tracks, and this served as the influence for trains designed by many subsequent systems, including Montreal in 1966, who built their entire system using rubber tires, and Santiago and Mexico City, where trains were based directly on those in the Paris metro. Globally, there are now over 40 train lines that use rubber tires. Many of those are automated, as rubber tires have allowed for more accurate and precise movements compared to steel on steel, which has helped to spur the development of autonomous systems. Speaking of that, Paris is not the first system with a driverless line, but it is the first to do so on such a big and busy system. And the Paris Metro is currently one of the most aggressive to convert more existing lines to automation and build driverless for future lines. I haven't even mentioned the RER or how that's helped pioneer the idea of a hybrid between metro and commuter rail. There's just so much to like about Paris. The metro really is what makes this city so romantic. Number 5, going way back to the Stockton and Arlington Railroad. This is the world's very first railway, at least the first to offer public regular service using locomotives. The system opened in 1825 to carry coal from mines out to ports, and then started passenger service a few years later in 1833. There is all sorts of great history here about how the original trains only averaged a few miles per hour, to how the trains fought for space on the rails with horse-drawn cars. Although not all of the original right-of-way is currently operational, some of it is, and you can still see the first locomotive and other preserved artifacts at the Darlington Railroad Museum. Number 4, Transmilenio. Bogota was not the first city with BRT, although neither was Curitiba, despite them often taking the credit. You can make the argument that BRT was put on the map by Curitiba, but Bogota is really where it transformed. Curitiba was famous in part because they showed how you could get a system set up with minimal funding and infrastructure, and then Bogota came along and said, well, here's what you can actually do with proper funding and infrastructure in a big city. Transmilenio is the system that took the concept of BRT and showed how to maximize its potential. Express lanes, high-capacity stations, fire-articulated buses everywhere, elaborate flyovers. This was the system that was idolized and modeled after more than any other. And more recently, it's also been innovative in its rollout of electric buses, something which I'm proud to say I was able to play a role in. Their plans are soon to reach over 1,000 e-buses, including testing on bi-Arctics, which is truly the final frontier of e-bus rollouts worldwide. Number 3, New York City Subway. Perhaps a controversial statement, but I think you can make the argument that New York City did for Subway what Bogota did for BRT, at least to an extent. New York is not the first system, but it does have higher ridership, more lines, and more stations than any system that preceded it. It was also an engineering marvel at the time for its safety features and tunneling techniques, especially under the East River. This is the system that introduced the third rail, the steel subway car, interlocking block systems, and this was also the first to include AC, which, by the way, was not until 1967. This was a great step forward, which you really appreciate when you get on one of the many trains that seemingly still doesn't have AC. Of course, New York is also famous for its extensive use of triple and quad tracking, which helped to pioneer the concepts of both express service and 24-hour coverage. The top 2 are next, and they may or may not be what you're guessing. I don't know, I have no idea what you're guessing. The one thing I do know is that you should like and subscribe for more arbitrary top 7 lists and other videos on travel recommendations focused on an overly specific niche. Part of my interest in this topic is to figure out where I should prioritize my future travel and future topics to explore in videos. So let me know if you have any other items you think deserve to make the list. I've been fortunate to see many on this list, but there is actually one entry I specifically traveled to see, like I decided to go there on vacation just to see the transit. Can you guess which one? A few honorable mentions. First, we've got the category of unique and innovative concepts that didn't quite make the list since they are not technologies that have really caught on, at least not yet, but they very well could in the future. Shanghai Maglev is the world's first commercial high-speed maglev. This is a technology that you could say really hasn't seen much traction since it opened, but there are a few projects and more systems planned to come online, especially in East Asia. The Personal Rapid Transit, or PRT system in Morgantown, West Virginia, was also an attempt at innovation that just hasn't caught on. If you're unfamiliar, this is a system where you tell the train where you want to go when you enter, and then it takes you and anyone else with the same destination directly there while bypassing all other stops. Very innovative, but not so influential. Perhaps controversial, but Waymo's autonomous vehicle fleets, which provided the first paid ride in Phoenix, is a more recent example of a technology that, honestly, I think is likely to become gigantic. But it didn't make the list since it's not yet widespread. Time will tell if these systems might one day be seen as a huge trendsetter, or will just end up as vanity projects and flops. Quite a few ferry systems were also mentioned in the Reddit post. I'm not sure if they are truly that wondrous, or if people just kind of like taking them because they're fun and offer great views. But the ferry system in New York ranked highest on my list, since the service on the Nassau from Brooklyn to Manhattan is often cited as sparking one of the first suburbs in the US. And speaking of water, bridges and tunnels are impressive and important, but they weren't really the focus of this list. Projects like the Channel or the brand new Huajing Grand Canyon Bridge in China are iconic, but really more transportation adjacent, usually championed more for their engineering and architecture than for their role in spurring transit innovation. And they have their own 7 Wonders list, so no need to double dip here. Similarly, metros with notable architecture are great, but they didn't get a leg up on this list. They're worth checking out, but I personally feel like you need more than just metro architecture to warrant that trip to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Alright, back to the wonders. Number 2, Shinkansen in Japan. As you probably already know, this is the world's first high-speed rail, which directly influenced basically every project after it, and is still one of the busiest globally. The first line from Tokyo to Osaka, which remains the core of the system, carries up to 16 trains per hour in each direction, or about a train every 4 minutes. Headways which rival most of the world's busiest metro systems. The first line opened in 1964 in anticipation of the Tokyo Olympics. Side note, say what you want about the Olympics and their impact on city resources, but they are a great way to spur transit projects. The Shinkansen was the first time the world really implemented the idea of a highway for trains, with rail fully grade separated from local trains, tracks using continuous welded rails and swing nose crossing points, measures to deal with tunnel boom, list goes on. And my number 1 transit wonder in the world, London Underground. As the world's first metro, the London Underground laid the groundwork for every subway that followed. It wasn't just the first of its kind, it opened over 30 years before any of its contemporaries. The London Underground opened in 1863, the same year President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, 13 years before the telephone was invented, and nearly 20 years before the first electric streetcar was introduced. And its oldest stations are still remarkably well preserved and relatively unchanged from their original design. Walking through Baker Street Station, for example, is pretty much a time portal into the 1860s. In addition to being the first subway, it has continued to lead innovation throughout its 150-year history. It racked up several superlatives before most other metros were even open. Before 1900, the London Underground was already the first to use electric traction, the first to feature innovations in tunneling, allowing to go deeper and using a technology that would lay the groundwork for modern-day tunnel boring machines. It was also the first to deal with terrorist attacks and develop counterterrorism plans. And this system has continued to innovate more recently as well. It was the first to use automatic train operations and the first to use contactless bank card payments. But outside of transit, this system is also just a cultural icon. The tube is synonymous with London and its history. The station iconography is used and known world over. The tube map influences designs of maps around the world, both metro maps and otherwise. And the system is historically relevant for its key role as bunkers and command centers during World War II, and there's an entire branch of tourism around touring converted and repurposed stations. The London Underground has it all. Incredibly innovative and influential in subway design, high cultural relevance. Oh, and by the way, it's still one of the largest and most ridden metro systems in the world. So that's the list. Arbitrarily cut off at top 7 because ancient Greeks decided that number was important. And as I mentioned before, here are the top 20, so feel free to pause and then write in the comments about how much you dislike my methodology. That's it for today. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.